Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Podcast listeners, welcome. Making Data Simple is online. It is hot outside. We are deep into summer now. I love it. Summer's my favorite time of year. In fact, I wish it was summer all year long. I went surfing this weekend. Now, it was lake surfing. It wasn't ocean surfing, which was fantastic. Behind a boat, the wave is always perfect. So it went great. But today I'm back to business. And yes, another incredible guest. My guest today is Carolyn Ward, who is an internal medicine physician and has passion for patient empowerment and data-driven decision-making. Data right up my alley, right? She has 8 years of experience in healthcare. This includes the chief resident at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. She is now the director of clinical strategy at Particle Health. She is responsible for developing the clinical product roadmap for the organization, ensuring that providers and patients are represented throughout the research and development process. I've read up on you, Carolyn, and I know your mission to be enabling a simple and secure access to actionable patient data. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We're going to have some fun today.
Thank you for having me.
I got to say something. You're in the bathroom. I've never done a podcast with somebody in the bathroom before.
Absolutely.
So why are you in the bathroom?
Absolutely. So for all other parents who work from home, I'm sure you know that the key to a successful remote work job from home when you have 2 little kids is a door that locks. And so we moved into this house about 3 months ago. So we're kind of like in the middle of like opening boxes and building furniture. And I've got like a nice built-in vanity desk in my master bathroom. And I was like, this works. And so here I am.
So you got a mansion and your bathroom's like huge so that you can just work in your bathroom. Fantastic.
It's like a bathroom
Everybody
office.
should have one.
Exactly.
You got everything you need, right? If you got a refrigerator in there, you don't even need to leave that area, I don't think.
Exactly. It's just you lock your door and then put on your noise canceling headphones and it's like you're alone here.
Refrigerator and coffee. All right. Hey, please introduce yourself in your own words.
Super excited to be here. So you're absolutely right. I am an internal medicine doc by training. I'm actually originally from New Jersey, so have only been out in California for a couple of years. And I really am passionate about the ability to take healthcare data and use it for leveraging like the ability to make people happier and healthier over a long period of time. And that's partly because I have a physician training where I like to see what I can do to help other people, but also selfishly as a patient, I want to know that the healthcare industry has a way to kind of give me high-level insights about where I'm going in my own health, right? And so that's kind of what took me here. I started my journey as an internal medicine resident, and also actually I did medical school in New Jersey as well. And during my time there, I realized there are a lot of like system-wide inefficiencies in our healthcare industry. And that's originally why I stayed on as a chief resident to kind of see, can I start to like dip my toes into that pool and learn a little bit more about what the healthcare system and hospital system looks like from a higher level. And then ultimately, I came out to California to pursue a primary care job at Forward, which is also a health tech startup, where I was able to work on clinical product as well as see patients. And I really loved being able to do both and kind of seeing both sides of the world. And at the end of the day, I really just felt like I could make more impact working on the product-facing side. And that's kind of where I landed at Particle.
Have you been a practicing physician then?
Both my role at Forward as well as my time during chief resident year, both were clinical facing. Right. Forward in general, like I had full patient schedules, Monday through Friday was seeing patients, but was also able to kind of be that clinical voice to inform some of the product decisions as well. But yeah.
So director of clinical strategy though, so you can work from home.
That's right. From my bathroom.
So you work 7 days, 5 days a week from home, probably 7 days a week, but every day from home then, huh?
That's right. Yeah. Particle is actually headquartered in New York City. And we are a remote first company. So a lot of our employees are kind of scattered throughout the US.
This is interesting because it's a little bit of a different topic today, but data is still in there. I'm interested in the role of platforms and data for premium healthcare and how you're optimizing for positive patient outcomes. Let me start with this question. Yeah, we're all snowflakes in some way. No person is the same. But when it comes to data in healthcare as patients, are we able to take patients and make them numbers such that we can learn more about them and in aggregate?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and ultimately why I want to step into this part of the industry, because I think that problem is really interesting. A lot of what we do currently in the healthcare industry when it comes to looking at patient data is in the de-identified space for research. And that basically looks at high level aggregated de-identified data to see, can we apply machine learning or other AI algorithms and tactics to kind of lift like general insights from that. What I really think we want to go as an industry is, can we then take that kind of information research and apply it to an individual? So I'll give you an example. The way physicians currently use information like this is, there was some large study out there that was done that shows if you have X, Y, and Z comorbidities, you should probably be on drug X. And that drug has been shown over 300,000 people to reduce the rate of heart attacks by, A percent, right? What individual patients come to physicians to want to know is, yeah, but what will happen if I take it? If Carolyn takes that drug, what will happen, right? And as a physician, I can tell you at a high level, like, well, out of every 10 people who took that drug, this is what happened. But I can't really tell you, this is what will happen if you take that drug. And I can't also really tell you, this is what will happen if you don't take that drug. I think we have a lot of directional learnings, but what I would really love to see happen in healthcare with the data that we can aggregate is kind of like what you're saying. Can we take all the data that somebody generates in their lifetime? And that, I think when we define quote, quote, healthcare data today, a lot of times we're talking about lab values, blood pressure, the clinical notes that happen in and out of, inpatient, outpatient settings. But I think in the future, healthcare data will probably be defined very differently. If you think about all the things that actually affect your health, it includes like where you live, what food you have access to. Do you cook at home? Do you eat out? Do you exercise? Do you have a gym membership? There's a lot of other pieces of data that actually affect our health quite a bit. And what I would love to see happen is, can we take all of that data that one individual generates during their lifetime and create like a digital twin of that person, right? Where this data construct basically maps out for us who Carolyn is based off of the data she generates. And when we are able to get to that state, we eventually are able to start running simulations and modeling to start to know, if we leave Carolyn alone to her own devices and she's just able to do whatever she wants in her current habits, what's going to happen to her? How long is she likely to live? What kind of diseases is she likely to develop? And then if we intervene with intervention Y, let's say, what will happen? And I think that when we get to that level, it's very empowering for physicians as well as for patients to take control of their health and actually be able to make informed decisions.
You're going to tell me not to eat out, aren't you? I shouldn't be eating out.
And, that's like the funny thing is, like, a lot of times patients would come to me and say like, well, I want to get healthier. What am I supposed to do? And I can give you some general directional things, right? Like exercise more, don't eat out that much.
Check.
Exactly. Cut back on coffee,
Hey, I don't drink coffee anymore. I got rid of coffee.
Well, that's a big one already.
So why is coffee bad for you? This is good. I did something right.
Yes, I love it. Well, generally, what I will say is that coffee in and of itself is probably not that bad for you, assuming you don't have certain health conditions. But coffee in excess is bad for you. And so
anything in excess is probably bad for you, right?
That's probably true. So it probably depends. But see, here's the thing. When you go to make that decision in your life, like, hey, I want to cut out coffee, what you really want to know is like, what is that barrier you're trying to achieve, right? Like if 1 cup of coffee is great for your mental health and doesn't do any damage to you, you probably don't need to cut that out. 3 cups of coffee, 5 cups of coffee, like where is that like amount of like effort versus benefit? You know what I mean? And I think,
Well, yeah, I know exactly what I was getting optical migraines every couple days, and I was cutting things out. I was trying to figure it out, and I have to say, I haven't had one for like 3 weeks, and I've cut coffee out like a month ago. So it
wow.
has. I think it's dehydrating me, even though I only had like one, maybe 2 cups.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
it
so
just doesn't agree with me.
the thing is, like, how did you figure that out? Trial and
I
error, right?
yes, I went back, and it was hell. It
Yeah.
took years to figure it out. To be honest with you, because I'm like, coffee. How can that be bad? I know it could be bad if you drink too many cups, of course. But here's the thing: it seems like the process gets in the way of what you're describing. Meaning, look, we have AI now. We have DNA. Why aren't we farther along in tailoring prescription and diagnosis to the individual?
Yeah, I will say that, like, so first, there are actually a lot of companies and a lot of research that is going into this area, especially in pharma. But I think a huge part of it is the way that we capture data in the healthcare system and where it lives. Data in healthcare is incredibly fragmented. And one of the like analogies I like to use at Particle is if you think of like pieces of data as Legos, before you can actually go and build something and like which I will say is like kind of like learning something from healthcare data, before you can actually go and do that, you have to like find all the Lego pieces. And in this analogy, your Lego pieces are scattered in like all the different random corners and recesses of your house. You need to be able to gather them together, sort them by color and brick type, and then start to learn how can you put these things together in a meaningful way. And where we are in healthcare today is in the gathering step. We don't have a great way to get information out of specific like health systems and allow that information to be aggregated on an individual level in a way that an individual could actually leverage that, or an individual's physician could actually leverage that data for that patient.
But is that because maybe I'm conspiracy theorist here? But isn't that because I mean it feels like a lot of the what I want to say the drug manufacturers, etc., are motivated to keep you taking Eliquis, to keep you taking these drugs. They may not be perfect for you, but if they can just keep pushing them out, they make more money. So why would they want to change anything and make things unique to the individual? I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that it's even in a way more fundamental than that. Like if we take a step back and think about like when you go to a physician, right? The information that comes or is generated from you going to, let's say, your primary care physician just for your annual wellness visit, that information lives in whatever EMR your physician puts that in, right? And the way it lives in that EMR is through structured clinical codes, as well as just free text that your physician decide to put in there. And the way that they choose to document certain things is heavily influenced by how they will be reimbursed by insurance. And so there's kind of two parts to that, I think. The first part is that that information is trapped in that EMR. If you then go see an endocrinologist down the road, the main way that most people still get from one doctor to another patient records is through the fax machine. Your endocrinologist is going to fax a request to your primary care physician. Your primary care physician is going to print out your health history and fax 200 pages back. Your endocrinologist is going to scan that fax into their EMR, and then that physician has to click there through 200 pages of PDFs for the one piece of information that they're looking for. And that is to your detriment as a patient. It's obviously super frustrating for physicians. I'm not trying to sit there, and I've done this many, many times, where you're clicking through all these PDFs looking for one singular piece of information. Will I find it? Probably. Does it take me a really long time? Yes. And all of that other information that sits in those 200 pages doesn't get captured into the EMR. I'm looking for the one thing I'm looking for, right? Maybe it's your last hemoglobin A1C. But in that 200 pages, there's probably like CAT scans and x-rays and blood pressures, which is not coming into my system at all. So I get a very narrow scope based off of what I have selected as your physician or specialist to look at. And I'm unable to fully account for everything else because of the way that information was transferred to me.
But that's exactly what I mean by process getting in the way. I mean, I've got the
Yeah.
conspiracy theory, in terms of what motivates certain companies like drug manufacturers or whatever. But also, yeah, we're still dealing with paper. I don't get it. I mean, I worked, my first job actually was a Cerner Corporation. I don't know if you ever heard of Cerner,
Yep.
right? So, I mean, I get the space you're talking about, but I don't understand why it's so slow. I mean, is it PHI? We should be on demand. We got, like I said, AI, DNA, we got sensors. I know this will sound kind of gross, but you should have like a toilet that could tell you, if you're pregnant, oh, his white blood cell count is high. You could know right there.
Yeah.
Why aren't we living in that age? It seems like it's one of the slowest moving fields, and I think it's one of the biggest opportunity fields in the future. So I think you're in a great space. But I don't know if you can further explain it to me. Maybe you've already tried, but why it's moving so slow?
I totally feel you. And part of it is that's the reason why I chose to come into this space, because I feel like there is so much opportunity here to bring technology in and allow the healthcare industry to evolve the way technology has enabled many, many other sectors and industries to evolve and iterate very quickly. And I think part of it is, you're right, there's incentives, right? And disincentives.
Hmm.
Large EMR companies don't necessarily want to share the data that they have, right? Like, they're not incentivized to be interoperable with each other. They want the market share. Now, there's laws and regulations out there that basically say that if a patient wants their healthcare data, they must be able to get it. But the process of actually getting that is incredibly difficult. Let's say you should try, and your audience should try to go get their health records, right? Like, a lot of times what it actually takes is going physically to a hospital administrative desk and asking them to print out your health records in front of you. And outside of doing that, it's very unlikely that you will have access. Now, are there like digital apps like MyChart and like patient portal apps? Yes, there are. And I think that that is one step in the right direction. And I think there's a lot of ways we have tried to move there as a healthcare industry with home monitoring devices, wearables, to try to capture some of this data. But the biggest reason why it's not leveraged is because these systems don't talk to each other. And I think a lot of it has to do with incentives. A lot of systems are not incentivized to
Hmm.
talk to each other.
So it's interoperability then,
Yep,
essentially.
exactly.
I can believe it. I mean, I had essentially a blown disc, and it was giving me some nerve issues. So I go in there, they do diagnostics. They give me CDs. I got CDs with my diagnostics. I'm like, I got to find a computer to put the CD on. And then I go back to my family practitioner who didn't even know about it. And then I say, well, I called you earlier. Your admin must have not, your nurse must not have told you about it. Okay, fine. He said, well, let me see it. I said, well, I have to go home and get the CD that they gave me the diagnostics with. I mean, I'm just dumbfounded. How is particle health going to solve this? Tell
Yeah,
me about
so
particle
one
health.
of our kind of main goals here at Particle is essentially that we have an API that allows you to query for an individual patient across the 3 national networks. And then we pull that information together into one longitudinal history. So this is the way we're like trying to tackle this problem, where these 3 networks have all these different EMR endpoints connected to them, right? So Commonwealth, Care Quality, and eHealth Exchange. And so that includes things like state HIEs, it includes the VA, it includes Epic, Cerner, Allscripts, all these different EMRs. And what we're essentially doing is, hey, if I can give you this set of demographics, so Carolyn Ward, where I live, my birth date, and these things, and these networks are able to confirm that this person is who they can match to on their end, they will pass us back all the data that Carolyn has generated. And we do this geographically by zip code. So, for example, let's say I'm going in to see a new primary care physician because I just moved to California, but all of my health records are in New Jersey, right? They would be able, my physician using Particle would be able to know this is where Carolyn used to live in New Jersey. We are going to go ahead and query a 50-mile radius around that so that they will capture my hospital visits, my primary care, my specialist, my OBGYN. We're going to pull all of that information that is passed back from the EMRs directly. and we're going to put it all together into one package and pass it to my new California primary care physician, so that when I go in for my first visit, I'm not having to sit there and fill out 20 pages about my own health history. A lot of people give up about halfway through, and you're kind of entering like semi-accurate, inaccurate data about like things that have happened to you that you may or may not remember fully, things that have happened to your mom, your dad, your grandparents. But they'll already have all my information. They'll know, okay, at some point a physician has documented these particular ICD-10 codes for diagnoses. This is the latest lab work. She's due for, this screening exam and things like that. And so our goal is essentially to help people to aggregate that data in a meaningful way.
Are you providing the interface for that aggregation of data, or are you just providing the API of interoperability between the networks?
So we are an API first. We have talked a lot about creating a UI or not. And I think the reason we've chosen to be API first is because we know that in the clinical workflow, physicians don't want to have to click into some other system to look at something, right? What they want is that information to be in their EMR in a way that is already fully structured and captured in their EMR. Any other system would essentially require your physician to still look at that screen and then document it back in their EMR. And anytime that happens, it takes a lot of time. And if a physician has like 20 minutes with you, I don't want them to be spending 17 of those minutes doing that transcribing. I want them to be talking to me for the 20 minutes that I'm there.
But aren't you going to run into the problem you described earlier as motivation, or whatever you want to call it, in terms of you have to have Epic or Cerner agree we should integrate with our competitor?
Yeah, so I think the beauty or the elegance of the solution is that Epic already has, first of all, Epic already has its own interop connectivity between all of its instances across the United States. But each of these large organizations, the EMR organizations, are already passing data to the 3 national networks. So they are both receiving and passing data to those networks, and we sit on top of the network. So we don't need to go to integrate in with every single hospital system and to integrate in with every EMR instance in those hospital systems, because if they have their interop solution already turned on, that is separate and in their EMR, they're already passing that data back to the national networks, and that's where we receive it from.
I'm sure everybody's following along here, but EMR being electronic medical record.
Yes.
Hopefully everybody knows that. But what are the 3 national networks?
So we have Commonwealth, Care Quality, and eHealth Exchange. There's basically 3 national networks. I would say Commonwealth is like a true network in the sense that it has all of these institutions. Let's think about these institutions that use EMRs, all different kinds of EMRs. They are connected to Commonwealth. And that means that when I pass my demographics over to Commonwealth, it uses their own record locator service to look at these endpoints and say, is there information for Carolyn in this hospital system, in this EMR, over here, over there? And then it pulls that information together and it passes it to us at Particle. Care Quality and eHealth Exchange are really more like backbone. So at Particle, our kind of like secret sauce is the fact that we have created and refined our own record locator service in order to search those networks. I would say Care Quality is predominantly Epic. So like all the places that use Epic in the United States, most of those are connected to Care Quality.
Where would Cerner fit into this mess then?
Great question. Don't quote me on this, but I think Commonwealth.
Particle Health, you provide the means to be able to pull multiple EMRs into one view of a single patient.
Yes, the data from those EMRs. So let's say, for example, I have gone to some health system, let's say Rutgers, Robert Wood, which is where I did my training. They're on Epic, right? And let's say I've also in California, I've gone to Hoag, which is where I delivered one of my kids, and they are maybe on something else, right? Some other health EMR. What I would be able to do is essentially go to the networks, figure out where the data is, and these networks will pull my data from Rutgers Robert Wood, and it will pull my data from Hoag, and it will pass all of that to Particle. What we do at Particle is we put it together, we deduplicate it because there's obviously a lot of probably maybe duplicative records in there. And then we pass that to our customers. What our customers typically do is they ingest that data into their own system, and they may ingest it into their EMR for to be clinician facing and to be used at point of care. They may also ingest it into like an analytic tool or a metrics tracking tool to be used for kind of higher level panel management.
All right, so let me restate this back to you, make sure I got it. So say I'm using Epic, Care Quality Network.
Yep.
And if that's all I need, it's fine. But if I want to see EMRs through Commonweal, then I would need something like Particle to put those two together and let me see it through one lens.
That's exactly right. And especially if you are a smaller organization or maybe like an up and coming digital health organization and you're not using Epic, which I would say most of those people do not, that becomes even more important, right? Because you don't even have your Epic network to fall back on to get data from. And I will say that like a lot of the people we work with are virtual healthcare providers. That their customers and their patients are likely seeing many other doctors in network, out of network, all over the place because their company is primarily virtual first. And so it becomes, especially for a risk-bearing entity where your reimbursement is predicated on you being able to deliver high patient outcomes at the lowest cost possible, and you're fully responsible for everything that happens to your patient, it only becomes more and more important that you have a full, complete, and comprehensive view of everything that is happening to that individual in the healthcare system nationwide.
Does nobody else do this?
It sounds like an important job, right? It sounds like an important problem to solve. I will say that there are a lot of, not a lot, it's interoperability is a new-ish space, or really a space that we've, I would say in the last few years, seen a lot of development in. So there are other companies that do this. And I think even like in the healthcare space, you hear the word interoperability bandied about quite a bit. And I think in a way it's lost meaning to a lot of folks because people use it in a lot of different ways. And at Particle, the way we use it is to get the right data to the right person at the right time.
Why wouldn't Epic do this? I guess Epic wouldn't do it because, they just want people to be on Epic. Just convert to Epic and you'll all be integrated.
Exactly.
So somebody like you have to bridge the gap.
Exactly. And so I think that it kind of goes back to incentives, right? Epic is obviously incentivized to capture as much of the market as possible, because if you got every single provider on Epic, then you wouldn't need an interop solution. I don't know if we'll ever get to a world where every single person is on Epic, but I think that even if we took a step back and looked at it from a larger lens, when I think about interoperability and data sharing, I think that clinical EMR data is a big piece of the pie, and that is where Particle is looking to solve the problem. But I also think in the United States in general, we will eventually want to probably get to a space where other data sets are also interoperable, right? So we're talking about like wearable data, like wearables and the data that's generating. I think a lot of more folks are going to start getting a lot of their healthcare treatment at home. I think that food is a big part of health, right? And I think that's also come up a lot recently in the last few years. But we probably want to learn about what people are eating, where they get their food, like especially in areas where there's food deserts, right? I have counseled a lot of patients who are looking to lose weight, and having the time to sit down with them and understand what their constraints are, like they don't have a kitchen, is a big constraint. You work 16 hours a day, that's a big constraint. And when you look purely at their EMR data, the EMRs are not fully capturing that picture today.
Well, that's why. It goes back to my original concern of sensors, AI. It seems like we got the technology, but we can't get everybody to agree on how to implement it, and everybody wants their share of the pie.
Exactly.
So it adds complexity to everything and it inhibits our progress.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also what makes it a very interesting problem to solve.
Yes. Tell me again, then, back to Particle Health. What can you do today? What kind of use cases? You already talked to the fact that you're aggregating data. Are you selling directly to hospitals? Are you selling to physicians? I mean, who is your clientele?
Yeah, so the way that we are able to query the data from the networks today is under the treatment purpose of use, meaning the people who are querying and asking for data have to have a direct provider-patient relationship with the individuals whose data they are requesting. So it can't be like any Joe Schmo down the road wants to know what Carolyn's healthcare data is, right? Like that would not be a safe system.
Yeah.
And so
Well, I was
we
going there next with PHI. Yes,
exactly,
go ahead.
exactly. And so we sell predominantly to providers, provider groups, and customers who service provider groups, as long as there's that direct treatment relationship there.
So how does that work though? They've got your API. First of all, what's your monetization plan around an API? I mean, how do you got to pay for the API? Is it like a SaaS?
Today, we charge based on usage, so it's charged per query.
Per query through the API.
Mm-hmm.
But so they get access through the API. They pay per query. How do you handle the PHI then? Going back to that, I mean, where is the checks embedded to that query?
Absolutely. So the way that, and actually, I feel like this is one of the main differentiators of Particle in this space, is that we have an amazing customer enablement team. So when customers sign up with us, they actually get some of our team members for the entirety of their relationship with Particle. And what our customer enablement team does essentially is they actually sit down with the customer and they think about with them, what are your clinical workflows that you need powered by clinical data? Who is going to be doing the querying? Do they have the right credentials? Are they in that direct treatment provider relationship with these patients? What is going to be the trigger for the query? And how do you plan to use the data? And we actually go into that at a very granular level of detail with all of our customers to, one, make sure that patients are protected. Two, we're following the network regulations because there are a lot of rules around querying these national networks. And then three, making sure that our customers are getting ROI from our workflows that we're helping them with, right?
But how would Epic know that you have permission from that customer? In other words, if you're going to go through that API, you're going to go through, get their EMR, bring it back. I presume you're moving that data.
Yeah, so actually, before you're even allowed to query the national networks, you have to fill out a questionnaire that has to be approved. So that's something our customers all have to fill out in order to get approved by the networks to query.
Is that through Epic? But Epic will then allow you to take that EMR out or the
So it
data from
actually
it?
is not related to Epic at all. It's related to the national network that Epic shares data with. So we actually never go to Epic and say, like, we want Carolyn's data. We go to Care Quality and we say we want Carolyn's data. And we're not necessarily saying we need it to come from Epic or we need it to come from Cerner or we need it to come from wherever. It's like whoever is sharing data with you about Carolyn, we want that data. And then the network questionnaire is the piece of information or the document that says that our customer has the right to this data. And that document tells the networks who our customer is, why they want the data, at what points in time can they query and get that data, and how they plan to use that data.
Well, that's fair. The permission comes from, in this case, the network. That
Mm-hmm.
could be Care Quality. And as soon as you get that permission on behalf to a unique sign-in, that representing, and it looks like you're selling directly to the patient then in this case.
We actually sell to the providers because
Okay.
that data actually goes directly into, in most cases, an EMR.
At the provider.
Yes. But like it could be, let's say, a large digital health primary care company.
Okay. Could it be insurance, by example?
That's a great question. Something we've gone back and forth with because health insurances really want this kind of data, but today they don't have a direct treatment relationship with patients. And so if they work with let's say a primary care group, then the primary care group is okay to trigger that query and get the data. But the health insurance, let's say the insurance adjuster, for example, would not be able to query because that insurance adjuster is not going to be treating the patient
I
themselves.
got it. I mean, that's why
Hmm.
I ask, right? And I'm also trying to make sure, or trying to figure out the checks and balances around PHI,
Hmm.
personal health or patient health information. Got it. Let me pivot then. What about the technology behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll say is that our main technology right now is the ability to search these networks. So as you can imagine, all of these endpoints that live on these networks and are passing information back and forth, you need to have a really good query logic to be able to find the person that you truly mean when there's probably like a lot of other people with the same exact name that live in the same exact area. So, number one, you want to make sure that you can find the correct person. What we don't want to do is to pass on information that is for a different person. And there's actually a lot of checks and balances from the networks themselves, which is really helpful. The second thing is that we know, and part of the reason we exist as a company is because we know that patients generate health data in a lot of different places. And so what we're really skilled at and what our query logic is able to do essentially is to figure out what is the way to get the best hit rate from the networks, and also to kind of start to track patients of where they're generating data so we can go ahead and grab those pieces of data. What this really translates to, I would say, is eventually where we want to go as a company, I think, and is into a world where we're able to say that we can pass you a complete set of data. Now, are we going to be able to find 100% of all clinical data that's generated by a patient? I'm thinking the answer is no, because I'm never going to be able to tell if you pop down the road to the mom and pop shop that uses a paper chart, right? That's that I'm probably never going to be able to find out that information. But what we can do is start to build logic into the way we query to start to say, hey, I thought I was going to find this piece of data and I wasn't able to find it. We have to go figure out what happened there, right? And I think this is really interesting because one of the concepts we've been talking a lot about is, can we start to think about improving our navigation around these networks? And when we get that data back, it's a lot of data, right? And we also don't want to inundate our end user clinicians with a lot of data. Like I just said, I don't want to click through 200-page PDFs, right? But even if I could translate that PDF, all that data from the PDF straight into your EMR, that is a lot of information for a clinician to be able to look through. So a lot of what we've been thinking about is, how do we start to map clinical concepts together so that we have a good understanding of, as a physician, if I am looking at a piece of data in the EMR, I'm looking for, let's say, a specific blood pressure, latest blood pressure. What is the surrounding pieces of data that I most likely want to know next? All pieces of data in healthcare are kind of connected, right? Like medical concepts are all almost related in some way, but some are more closely related than others. And it's the ability to map out those degrees of relationship and understand what a clinician will want to see next that I think could be really powerful. And that's kind of part of what we were talking about when we say we want to display the right information at the right time to the right person.
We're still at the basics of aggregating that data, though. What about what you talked about in terms of sensors, in terms of eating habits, in terms of exercise? Are you looking at putting wearables or integrating wearables into your solution, or is that way down the road?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what I will say today is that actually some EMRs do integrate some of those wearable device data into their EMRs directly today. So, if that is the case, we do get some of that data today. But obviously, one of the things we think about is like the completeness of that data, right? So, we would rather be able to get it, or I would rather be able to get it directly from the wearable device in some way than have it ingested into the EMR. I pull, the EMR goes to the network, I pull from the network. I mean, that's just a lot of places that data can go missing. And so it is actually something that we've talked about quite a bit when we talk about additional data sources. There's some that we have looked at pretty closely. I would say that wearables is probably in the middle of that road. What I mean is, what are other additional data sources that are a lot closer to clinical data would be like laboratory data, like connecting directly with labs. It could also mean like pharmacy fill data. It could mean claims data from health insurances. And then like a lot of really hot topics are around genetic data, social determinants of health data, and wearable data. I would say like those three are kind of, there aren't really great solutions to connecting with them today. So it's not something that is immediately on our roadmap, but it is something that I've thought a lot about because I think there's a lot of opportunity in that space. And then when you even think like even further out from that, you start to think about really interesting concepts like the ability to map out like food deserts, transportation deserts, healthcare access deserts, and how that actually also affects somebody's health. I think that that's what's so exciting about this field is as a species, we are generating more data than ever, and we have created more devices to capture that data. And now our goal essentially is how do we actually make that data usable? How do we leverage that data to actually create like action items that would affect your health so that you know like what you should do next? And I think one of the main powers of the wearable data is the ability to see it in the context of your clinical EMR data that you've generated, right? Like your lab tests and your family history and your diagnoses and your comorbidities, and kind of see how does that entire picture play together. But the problem is that the way data is housed in an EMR today makes it very difficult for you to lift that level of insight, even on an individual patient. And so the way that happens today is that a physician sits in front of an EMR and reads the entirety of the chart. And they do that level of abstraction in their head. And given the primary care physician shortage that is happening in the United States, we know that that is just not scalable, right? And so if we are unable to scale that with technology, that means that a lot more folks in the next upcoming decades are going to lose access to primary care.
What role do you see AI playing in the healthcare in the future?
I think there's been a lot of talk in the industry about using AI for diagnostic capture. We talk about ChatGPT for like doctor note taking and things like that. And obviously at a somewhat more lower level AI of like rule-based actions of automating a lot of like the routine things that happen as part of the healthcare process. But what I think would be more interesting is, yes, we want to be able to automate away the things that we don't want somebody with a physician's license to have to take care of. We want people to be operating at the top of their license. And I think that that is really important. And I think that that will significantly help to address physician burnout. But at the same time, I think that what I would like to see AI do essentially is, can you tell me something about the patient that I could not tell as a physician? Like me looking at the data, I will probably never, or maybe not for, unless I sat there for a very, very, very long time, be able to abstract this insight because of how much data there is. I think back in the day when you had a physician that came to your house with a little black bag that contained every treatment that we currently knew, and whatever was in that bag, no matter what you had, you got one of those 5 things and that was your treatment. Then it was easy to be able to say, yeah, one person should be able to know everything that is out there in medicine. That is not the world we live in today. And I think to ask physicians to kind of be the be all end all of knowing medical data is something we are very quickly going to run into a wall with. What I want to see from AI is, can you help me to look through all the data that this person has generated and tell me something that I would not be able to figure out myself?
Where is Particle Health today on its journey? I mean, is this a startup, past startup phase? I mean, where are you at?
We are definitely a startup. So I think we have like 45 employees or something like that.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
Yeah, we raised our Series B maybe like a little over 6 months ago at this point. So I would say we're like very healthily in the startup space.
And did you say you're in California too, right? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Southern Orange County.
Southern Orange County. Okay, fair enough. Anything I didn't ask you that you wish I would have?
No, I think this has been a really fun time. I think we covered a lot of really great things. Not that I can think of.
Where can listeners reach you?
I would definitely love to hear from listeners. If people have like questions or thoughts that they wanted to shoot across to me, you can reach me at carolyn.ward@particlehealth.com.
Where can they reach Particle Health?
You can reach us at particlehealth.com. We have a lot of really great information on interoperability, also like where the industry is in that space, and obviously all of our product related things on our website as well.
We talked about interoperability. We talked about AI. We may have hit a little bit on patient engagement and empowerment. One thing I saw when I was researching is physician burnout.
Yeah, so I would say that that's not necessarily something that Particle is addressing directly, but it is something that I'm very passionate about. And one of the reasons I joined Particle is because during my time practicing as a physician, I start to suspect that one of the main causes of physician burnout is actually a data problem. And when you ask people why they became a doctor, the overwhelming answer is because they wanted to help people. They want to do something that's intellectually challenging, and they want to do something that's people facing, and they want to do something that they feel like has impact. Issue with medicine and the way it's practiced today is that 90% of medicine is practiced in front of a computer. And there's all sorts of ways that organizations have tried to address this. The way we position the computer in the room, so I'm still facing the patient, having a scribe. There's like all these ways that we try to tackle it, but it's just that fundamentally, so much of medicine is the ability for a person to sit in front of a computer and ingest data that is in a computer screen into their brain, and then to type data back into the computer screen. And that data informs future decision making. It includes current action items. But that overall process is very depersonalizing, right? It's no longer a relationship that you're having with a patient. And it makes it essentially that you're working at a desk for a large part of the day. And when you talk to a lot of physicians, they're like, that's not really what I thought this job was going to be. I thought this job was going to be with people. And I think it is what causes a lot of physicians to feel burnt out, to lose motivation, and to feel disconnected from their patients and from their work.
That's good. That's very interesting. Carolyn, thank you for being with us today. This has been an intellectual discussion. I appreciate it and hope to have you back sometime.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You listeners, reach out as always on almartintalksdata@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll see you on the podcast. Later.